a really great eater, and then you notice that things have started to drop off over, it could be months, it's often over the course of a few years. I had a discovery call today with a family who was telling me that their child is 8 and that this has been a struggle for a couple of years, and that things have just gotten to a point where it's just getting more difficult to navigate, where she is dropping reliable foods off her list, and there are times where now she isn't eating what she would just skip dinner rather than eat something that she doesn't want when that's offered. So this family is doing a really good job. They've done my online courses and they've implemented a lot of those strategies over the years, and now they need a little bit more in terms of what do we do when she doesn't want to eat the food that's on her plate, and what do we do and what do we say when she decides that she would rather just not eat when she doesn't like the food that's on her plate, because they had an experience where she woke up the next morning after not eating in the night before, and she woke up feeling really sick. So a lot of this, and I talk about this pretty much every time I go live, that how we discuss and communicate around food with our children is essential to ensuring that we have success. Especially even if your child is 2 years old. I have a lot of kids in my groups that are, well, the parents of the children in the groups, who are 2 or 3 years old, and then I have some that are older. So I've got a couple of 9-year-olds in my group, and in the past I've had a couple of kids that are also 10 and 11, but usually the kiddos cluster between about 4 and 6. But I do have some in pretty much every group that are a little bit older and some that are a little bit younger. And when we go through the tools of what we're implementing that week in the small coaching group, because the groups are small, I get to know the people in the group. So if I know, for example, now I have a 2.5-year-old in my group and a 3-year-old in my group, and I'll say to them, hey, this is how you're going to implement this with your kiddo. And that's very different to how do we talk about this with a 7, 8, or 9-year-old, and how do we implement the tool with a child of that age, where the conversations that you can have are much more in-depth, and the language and the wording and the way we talk about food is just different. So if this is something that I have noticed, and I'm curious if you're watching this live or recorded, let me know in the comments. Is this something that if your child says like, ooh, yuck, I don't want that, where I see a lot of parents really struggling is after that has occurred, the parent is like, well, they either pressure the child to continue to eat, like, oh, you haven't tried it, you don't know, you have to eat it, blah, blah, blah. There's either parents that go down that, like the pressuring route, or there are the parents that are like, I'm not supposed to pressure, I'm just not going to say anything, and then they just kind of ignore it and leave it. And both of those ways of approaching it, there is a better way of approaching it, and that is fostering more conversation and talking more about it, which again comes into how do we communicate with kids when they say something is gross, or it smells bad, or they don't like how it looks, or something like that. And that is a large part of what we do in the groups. So what I told this family on the discovery call was, based on everything they've told me, the group is a good fit for them. If you have a highly complex case, if your child has ARFID, or if your child has like multiple other issues, or if you've already worked with multiple dietitians, several feeding therapists, or an OT, you may have already implemented quite a number of things that we do in the group, in which case you wouldn't be a good fit for the group, you'd be a better fit for one-on-one. This family is a really good fit for the group, and that's great because there's a really nice community atmosphere where people get to know each other, and you get to feel supported not just by me, but also by the other parents who know what you're going through. So when we work together in the group, at the end of the group, the goal is not that your child eats everything, because I can't guarantee that, and nobody can guarantee that in 8 weeks your child's going to be eating everything. In this, it's kind of like if you were to take a course about meltdowns, it doesn't guarantee your child's never going to have a meltdown. It means you are going to know, how do I effectively deal with myself during a meltdown? How do I effectively communicate with my child during and after a meltdown? It's more about, okay, this is something that is going to be something continuing on our journey, because even a great eater, like I have 2 kids, one of them is a great eater, the other one is more selective. So I have to use my own tools with my more selective one quite often. But my older one, who is the better eater, there are still things that we have to work on a daily or weekly basis. So even a child that is a quote unquote great eater they still go through things. So even a child that is not highly prone to meltdowns would still benefit from a parent knowing how to manage it. So the goal at the end of the 8 weeks is that you are confident and equipped in, all right, when my child says, ew, that's yuck, or when I serve a new type of food, this is how I do it in a way that is most effective and is most likely to help my child want to try this food, which helps you be less stressed. Because that was one of the things that this family was telling me that I asked them. They said that they would like to have meal times that are less stressful. And so I asked them, where is the stress coming from? And some of it was coming from planning the meals and making sure that there were reliable foods for the child. And the other part was the stress at the table if the child wasn't eating the food or didn't want to try the food, that is stressful, which it completely is. Just anecdotally in my own life, yesterday I made a new kind of fish, and my kids do eat fish. I made a different kind of fish. I made flathead fish, which is still, it's a white fish, but it looks a little bit different than salmon or like the usual fish that I would make at home. And my kid, who is happy to try everything, tried it, no problem. The other one did not want to try it right away. So it took a slower approach. In the end, she did try it, and there was no pressure to try it, because it's all about empowering the child to want to do it. Because when they do it because they want to do it, not because I have said or you have said, you need to try this, you don't know if you don't like it, try a bite, and then you can tell me you don't like it. If a child eats something that way, they're much less likely to have a positive experience with it. And think about it. If you had an easy out of trying something and saying you don't like it and then you don't have to eat any more of it, that's what I would do. I'd be like, okay, I don't like it. They're much less likely to have a positive experience with it. So when we remove the pressure and we do it in a fun way and we communicate in a way that is without pressure, that's how we're going to get a better response from the child. And yes, in the end, my child did try the fish and she did eat it, and she's excited to take it for school tomorrow. Remember, the goal is not necessarily that the child tries the food and eats the food. Because if you go with that mentality, if your child doesn't try the food, you're going to feel like I failed because they didn't try it, or you're going to feel like I need to pressure them to try it. You haven't failed if your child doesn't try the food. You've still exposed them, and ultimately, if you're implementing the entire array of tools here, it is a positive exposure. And if your child tries it because you forced them to try it, they've had a negative exposure, which is not helpful to anybody. All right, so that's what I wanted to share today. I've seen there are a couple of comments and questions that have come through, so I'm going to go back and just have a read through them and answer some of them. So if you have questions, please do send them through. If the coaching group sounds like something that you would like to learn more about, please send me a private message on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. This is my last coaching group of the year, and there are the family that I spoke with today want to join, so there are only a couple of spots left, and then my next one is not till January. This year has been a big year for me, and I'm looking forward to taking a break. Part of me was like, should I do an intensive group at the end of the year in like December? I'm not doing that. So this will be my last group for the year. So if you want to join, it starts next week. You get access immediately to my online courses to start working through. And there are some modules on the client portal that you can also get started on. All right, so I've got somebody saying, I'm a nanny. I think I learned from you years ago, but a lot of times I say you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. Yes, that does sound like something that I do say a lot. They relieve the pressure and more often will circle back to what they have read. Yeah, exactly. Not pressuring is such a huge part of this. And it's also a way to take the pressure off ourselves. If we, like yesterday's, I actually made the fish for lunch because I thought to myself, if I make this at dinner time, I'm probably going to have less chance of being successful with it. Because when your child is tired and it's close to bedtime, I'm not loving this. When it's late and your child is closer to bedtime, they're less likely to have they're less likely to be in a more regulated state. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this at lunchtime. I was quite strategic, and we did the fish at lunchtime. If she hadn't eaten the fish, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. But pressuring her to try the fish is worse than her not eating the fish at all. Okay. As parents, you give into the safe food. Okay, so turning forward, doctor said it's just picky eating, but it's so hard. So I'm not sure if I missed the first. Oh, my child is 4 and won't attempt to eat. Okay. if you're still on the live, I think I asked you before, is it that your child doesn't want to try new things and that they'll happily eat their reliable foods and they're constantly asking for their reliable foods? Or is it that they just have no interest in food whatsoever and they will go hungry for a long period of time? That is something that is more characteristic of ARFID, a complete lack of interest in food. And that is absolutely not something to ignore. If your child is only wanting to eat reliable foods, that's also not something to ignore, because if your child's only eating reliable foods, what somebody said lower is that the parents don't want the child to be hungry. Of course you don't, and that you're going to give in. So if we have this mentality of, I just need to be strong and I just need to like not give my child those foods, you're actually making your job much harder, and you're going to be really stressed in this situation, and your child's going to be stressed in that situation. So nobody's actually set up to be successful at all. So I don't ever recommending starving a child or playing this game of chicken where you're just like, oh, you want that food, well, I'm going to say no, and you can have that once you've done this. I definitely, like, under no circumstances recommend doing that, whether the child has ARFID or not, like, ever. If you're concerned that your child has ARFID and you want to talk to your pediatrician or your doctor about that, please make sure that the person you're speaking to knows what ARFID is. It's only been a recognized eating disorder for just over 10 years. And I've heard from parents anecdotally that doctors have no idea what it is. So if your doctor doesn't know what it is and they don't seem confident to you in that, go to a different doctor, please. Okay, my son is 7 and only eats mostly carbs. It's very difficult to get him to try new things. Okay, so in a situation like this, I always want to know, what are some of the things that you have tried in the past? And how long has this been going on? Is this something that happened recently? Why? Or is it something that's kind of been slowly festering in the background over the course of many years? So what I would say in that case, there's no specific strategy that will fix everything. And anyone who says that is not, they don't know what they're talking about, because this takes an understanding on my part of what you have tried. And if there's been a lot of pressure in the past, we need to undo that. So at the moment, one of the parents in my small coaching group has a 9-year-old who has ASD, and she has been pressured to eat for many years. So at the moment, we're still very much working on unraveling that to get to the point where the child is open to communication about food. So every person who's in a group with me or as a client, they start in a different place. Not everyone has used pressure before, but some parents have used a lot of pressure before. Some parents are giving snacks a lot and others aren't. Some people apply a really good schedule and mealtime routine, which is fantastic. So everyone starts in a different place, and we have to work on, okay, what has kind of led us to this point, and how do we undo that? And then how do we insert these new tools and the new communication strategies to improve that? And that might look different from person to person, which is why I keep the coaching groups small. Someone actually asked me, who's a parent who's interested in joining the group, she sent me a message and she said, so in the chat, how often are you responding to people? Is this like within 24 hours? And in the group agreement, it says between 24 and 48 hours. But I'm highly invested in my groups. Like I said, I keep them small so I get to know the people in the group, so I can provide you the support that you need. If I have 100 people in the group and you're sending me long messages every day, I would literally be reading messages and responding all day. So it's important that the groups are a manageable size for me and also for you. So yes, generally speaking, if it's on a weekday, I'm pretty much, unless I'm sick or something like that, you'll generally get a response within 24 hours, not including the weekend, because mealtimes are stressful and we're having 5 meals and snacks a day. So you do need that feedback reasonably in a timely manner. And that's really important to me to provide. I suspect ARFID and thought attending new physician. Attending new physician is just looking for help understanding. Okay, so I think you're doing the right thing by seeking a potential evaluation. So we'll only eat reliable foods. So what you can do, you can always send me a private message. Given kind of what you're describing here, I would have more questions because it's really important. I don't want someone, when someone messages me about the group, there's a series of questions that I'm going to ask you to make sure that you are a good fit for the group. Because if you're not, if your child is highly complex, doing the group is not going to help you. It's going to be more stressful, and I'm not able to cover, like, the scope of the group may not reach where you need to be. And there are sometimes people, when I get on the phone to do a discovery call, I will just say, absolutely, like, you've tried a lot of things, and a lot of these things are things that we cover in the group. You're not going to get the value out of the group because you've already done a lot of these things, and I would recommend one-on-one. So please, if you would like to chat more, send me a private message. Give me some details. Tell me you came from the live. Give me some details about what's going on, how it's affecting you on a daily basis. And we'll make sure, if you do want to do coaching, that either the group is the right fit or one-on-one is the right fit. So my child doesn't seem to have hunger cues ever since birth. Actually, that sounds like a discussion to have with the doctor and getting an evaluation for ARFID, because one of the diagnostic criteria is a lack of interest in food. That's not to say that's what it is, but it could be. I wonder what sparks picky eating. This is a really good question. And this is something that I've researched quite extensively over the years where I've been working with this. And there is a hereditary genetic component to it. That's not to say that because you were a picky eater, your child is going to be a picky eater. It's kind of like if you have heart disease in your family, or if you have a certain type of cancer history in your family, that doesn't mean that you are going to get that as well. What it means is you need to manage your risk factors. So if it's heart disease, for example, if you eat lots of fiber and exercise, move your body, and you maintain a healthy, active lifestyle, you're much less likely to develop that. And in the same way, if you were a picky eater, it's not to say that you can't change your genetics. What you can do is you can manage when your child starts to become a picky eater. How do you respond to this? And a lot of this comes back down to how we communicate. Because if you feed into this and pressure them and force them to eat things, you are going to have a much more negative outcome than if you don't do that. And if you use other tools that are not pressure-based, play-based, versus the pressure ones. Look here. I thought I saw something come on Instagram. If you're on Instagram and you have a question, can you tap the little bubble that has the question mark in it and put the question in there so that I don't miss it in the feed, because sometimes I don't see it. My 6-year-old doesn't like broccoli. What can I do to help her like it better? Question back for you. So for a child that doesn't like something in particular, my question is always, especially if someone's messaging me or is on a live with me, there's a good chance that if you're following me, this is not an isolated incident. So if you're still on the live, is this something that it crosses into multiple different kinds of food, multiple different food groups? If yes, you're probably you do have an issue with more than just broccoli. So for example, this is a great example. One of my kids, excellent eater, will happily try things. She's never really been a fan of cooked mushrooms, really, ever. And she'll almost always pick them out. I still expose her to them, and we have lots of conversations about them, and we do all kinds of things with them. They appear in different foods and whatever, and in different forms and all these sorts of things. She's never been a fan of cooked mushrooms. If that's the only issue in isolation, like literally happy to eat pretty much everything else, I really wouldn't be concerned about it. If it's something that is like, that's one of the foods that we eat a lot, like mushrooms, and she also doesn't want to eat rice, and they also don't want to eat like any other vegetables, and they only eat 3 kinds of fruit, and like the banana that she likes to eat, it has to be like certain level of spottiness, or it has to be yellow, or it has to be whatever. Those really specific issues, show me, and they would show you as well, that this is a deeper issue. If it's only one food, like everybody has preferences. For me, for example, if you've been following my journey, I've been learning to like beetroot in different forms and capsicum, bell peppers in different forms, because they're not my favorite foods, but I've been practicing those. If I was having that problem with like 50 common foods, that's more of an issue than just one or two little specific things. So just quickly with the broccoli, what spices can we add to it? Can we try it raw? Can we try it cooked really soft? Can we try it mashed with something that they do like? Can we try it added to something that they like? If they like pasta sauce, can we add a small amount of broccoli to the pasta sauce? Those are just some really simple things that you can try. This is very insightful. I didn't agree with doctors telling me to just serve him the same dinner. So ideally, like not to cater to his restrictions. Ideally, we're not catering to the point where the child's having a separate meal. In groups and when we work one-on-one, the goal is not to be serving separate meals. The goal is to serve one meal for everybody, but it's a respectful meal. It's a meal the child can be successful with. If your child doesn't eat, I'm just going to throw out an example. If you're making curry and rice for dinner, if your child doesn't eat curry and they don't like rice, that is not a respectful meal. There's no way that your child can be successful with that meal. So we need to come up with a meal that that there's something reliable for them to eat. Ideally, like sometimes depending on the child and how selective they are, one food might be okay, like the rice might be enough. But if we're talking about an extreme picky eater, and I've got a good example from one of my groups where the child's got a very limited number of reliable foods and they find themselves serving corn cakes or corn crackers constantly. There's really not much nutrition to those. There's not like, they are kind of complex carbs, but there's no fat in there. There's like hardly any fat. There's like hardly any protein. There's really not much of anything in there. So if that's the only reliable food your child is eating 3 times a day, they're not meeting their nutrient requirements. So more than one reliable food is more than likely necessary. So it's all about how you plan the meal and making sure that you're not catering and making them a separate meal, but you're also making a meal that they can be successful with, hence respectful, because it's respectful to everybody. There's nothing quite as stressful as sitting down knowing that your child's not going to eat anything. And then you're going to have this battle of, well, I've made dinner, they should eat it. That's just not that's not the reality for most parents in this situation. My child doesn't like any veg, ADHD and ASD. If he has a rice-sized bite, he will spit it out immediately. Okay, Lucy, I have a lot of questions. How long has this been an issue? Is this like a recent thing? You said doesn't like any veggie, so I'm guessing that literally is every veggie. If we were to work together, I'd want to know more about what are some of the things you've tried. Depending where you are in the world, you may have seen a feeding therapist or an OT, or have you worked on this before? What does that look like? What are some of the things you've tried? Was anything successful? So it's been an issue since he was young. Okay. Depending on whether like some of the things that you've tried or not, which is, if you wanted to get in touch with me, please send me a message through TikTok or Instagram to let me know what you've tried. Like I said earlier in the live, if you're someone who has tried a lot of different things and worked with other professionals, the group may not be the right fit for you. I have had a number of parents who have children with ADHD or ASD that join the group that succeed really well in the group. And I also have a lot of my one-on-one clients are kids that have ASD or ADHD. Depending on if their case is much more complex, I would definitely recommend one-on-one. Or if you've worked with other professionals before, you may not want the group setting, especially if you've tried many of the things that are in the group, which when you message me, let me know some of the things that you've tried, because the last thing I would want is for you to join the group and have already tried a lot of these things and have it not be successful because you've already tried a lot of the things. Can kids have hunger cues, or what could be wrong? Or what could be wrong if my child doesn't seem to have any? So Ashley, I think you might have asked this earlier. For children that have like a quote unquote low appetite, It's something to push with your doctor or pediatrician, whoever looks after your child medically, to either get an assessment for ARFID or to investigate if there's a deeper issue. Sometimes if your child has celiac disease and it's undiagnosed, they could be having a lot of pain. Not everybody who has celiac disease has stomach pain or bloating. Some people don't have any symptoms. Other people have very severe symptoms. So that could be something as well, and often would warrant more investigation. I thought that by 6 years old, my daughter would be eating fruits and veggies, and she's not. Okay, that's the whole, like, we expect our child to grow out of picky eating thing, which is really not typically what happens, which is where I always say in my posts and when I'm doing a live that getting started as early as possible is the best thing to do, because how we respond to that makes a huge difference. And not only how we respond to it, but how we continue to expose them. So Lucy, any tips for now? Just keep encouraging to try a bite. No, I don't recommend encouraging to try a bite, because that's pressuring. And we want the child to want to try the food. And like I constantly am talking about communication strategies. There's a very big difference if I sit down to eat a meal with you and I say, Lucy, I mean, I've served you green beans 1,000 times and you never try them. Like, you don't know if you don't like them unless you eat them. Here, try one. That is very different than me sitting down and saying, like, oh, can we make a green bean mustache together? And what is that like? When we take the focus off our goal of getting them to eat the food, that's where we're going to see more success. And that's where, like, it's communication strategies, the tools that we use are about how do we help the child want to try the food themselves. That's the ideal. When we pressure them or ask them to do things, they're much less likely to want to do it. And that is not a positive exposure. So, Lucy, what I would suggest, send me a private message. Let's chat about this in more detail and make sure that the group is the right fit for you. Can kids unlearn these behaviors? Yes, absolutely. Even children, there was a client that I had whose 6-year-old had ARFID, and a lot of the how do I say this? A lot of the acute issues that they were having, which were frequent meltdowns at meal times, a lot of that was because even though the parents were amazing parents, like rock star clients, they were still pressuring their child to eat, which was causing more anxiety and was making things harder for everybody. So it's not just about kids unlearning things. Like, there's nothing wrong with your child. A lot of the time, and this is something a lot of the parents in the groups will tell me, this has been very insightful and eye-opening, because I've had to change a lot of things. I've had to rework my mindset. I've had to change my communication. I've had to shift the way I think about having my child try something. It's not, if your goal is, I want my child to eat this thing, you are going to make your life very difficult, and you're going to make things harder for your child too, because it's not that there's something wrong with your child. We're the parent. We lead this. If we are pressuring the child to eat, we need to change that. It's on us to do that. It's not on your child. So that it can come across quite harsh, but also remember, you're the parent, and you're the one, if you're the one that is encouraging the bites and pressuring them, you get to change that. That's within your control to change. Whether your child eats the broccoli is not in your control. So when you can kind of rework that mindset of, okay, it's about how I communicate. I can show up and change the way I communicate. That's in my power and my control. That is a very empowering thing. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. So if you have questions, if you want to join the group, like I told you, it starts next week. This is my last group for the year. And if you would like to join, please go and send me a private message. Let me know you came from the live. Give me a bit of background about what's going on, your child's age, some of the things that you've tried, and we'll make sure the group is the right fit for you. And thank you for sending questions and for being here live. And like I said, send me a private message and we'll chat in more detail. All right, have a lovely day, and I will speak with you soon. Bye.